consolidated and to some extent legitimized, that is, appeared to democratize the original NRM statutory structure established in 1997. The 1993 statute, the term resistance councils and the committees were replaced by the local committees and councils. In other words, the 1993 law substituted the term RC for the term LOC, Resistance Council with the local council. That was not a substantive transformation of the system. It was exactly the same system, but only the labels changed. The real political purpose of the 1993 statute was further to institutionalize NRM power structures by fusing society with the state. Other observers have reached a similar conclusion. Quote, LOCs served as the organs of the people, the state, and the NRM, all in the same instance. This created a certain ambiguity in their purpose and function. As organs of the people, they were intended to be the key vehicle for popular participation and were expected to hold civil servants and the state accountable to the people. At the same time, the LOCs were under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Local Government, acting as extensions of the central government. And finally, prior to multipartyism, they served as the political organ of NRM, which was supposed to be a substitute for political parties by containing members of all parties and political leanings within the movement. Now, that quotation is Ailey Mari Tripp. She wrote a book entitled Museveni's Uganda, Paradoxes of Power in a Hybrid Regime, published in 2010. That's her comment. It sounded very much like a Mubilu Musoke's comment, but it is not Mubilu Musoke's comment. The reason to abandon UPM was therefore a conscious political strategy which most people never understood. Museveni had far more political power of the political process under NRM than he would ever dream of as leader of a traditional political party, UPM. Now you understand where I'm coming from. You probably also understand where I'm going. The Local Government Act 1997, even though widely publicized as a democratizing law, that is, democratizing by putting power in the hands of the people, did not institutionalize the democratization process. It replaced the district administrator appointed by the central government under the 1993 law with the LOC 5 chairman elected by the people as the chief administrator of the district. However, even the 1997 law, the president still appoints the RDCs for each district, and the RDC advises the LC5 chairman on policy. This is the person who is elected by the people, being advised by RDC, who is appointed by the president. You can see what a terrible confusion here is. It is not far from being democratic. The central government funds the district government, which has no taxing powers, and therefore fiscally not independent from the central government. Ailey Mari Tripp concluded that, quote, a persistent theme emerges from the central government's dealings with the districts, local councils, kingdoms, and local associations. Its repeated efforts to create vertical linkages of dependency and patronage. These vertical linkages were to replace the harder to control horizontal societal and political linkages. The LC system was initially to serve as a political machine for the movement system. That was to replace the political parties, and the regional tier system was to preempt any political role the kingdoms might aspire to, unquote. Democratization requires far more than the adjustment of the administrative structures. Social change is an important component of democratization. Nelson Kasfa, specifically commenting on what was happening in Uganda in the late 80s and early 90s, points out that, quote, meaningful democratization, that is the movement from authoritarian rule to democracy, is a social process that requires time, strategy, and some unusual alliances. It does not suddenly materialize simply because an election is held. Democratization is achieved when people in general are assured that they can organize and discuss political issues openly, they can vote freely, the election will put the government of the day at risk, and the government can be expected to shape its policies in response to the election. An extended, more contested notion of democratization requires dominant social groups and not just ruling organizations to accept the right of losing power. On that extended basis, few countries in the world can claim to have achieved a full measure of democratization. Nevertheless, Nelson Kasfa concludes, the NRM came to power supporting some elements of this more dramatic definition, unquote. In essence, democratization requires social change, a transformation of both the behavior of the leaders and the reactions of the people to the behavior of the leaders. As Nelson Kasfa innocently points out, Museveni's original intentions were assumed to be genuine. History has, however, demonstrated that Museveni was anything but an honest proponent of democratization of Uganda through the NRM political structures. Museveni's ideological ambiguity infected the entire NRM regime and negatively affected the democratization process. Quote, the history of the NRM's changing doctrines on its path to power helps explain its ambiguity towards democratization. It evolved from a tiny military unit dependent on the Tanzanian army during the liberation of Uganda to a hastily organized party for a few months in 1980 and 1981. It then passed through two phases of a guerrilla movement. First, under Lule, it committed itself to restoring multi-party competition, and then under Museveni to a combination of popular councils and parliament. Finally, it became the senior partner, sharing power in a Ugandan government. No wonder the NRM never made a consistent or pure choice of definition for democracy in Uganda. Unquote. This statement needs a brief explanation. From its formation in 1981, Lule was the leader of NRM until his death in 1985. The 10-point program was drafted in that period, and Lule's influence on the 10-point program is apparent for those of us who knew him. The program emphasized democracy, accountability, attack on corruption, and a program for economic recovery. After Lule's death, however, ideological ambiguity returned to NRM policy making. Even though the content of 10-point program outlived Lule and remained the same, its viability was adversely undermined by Lule's death. It practically died with him. After Lule's death, the top leaders of NRM, Museveni to be specific, decided that genuine democratization was not their real goal. Political control of the system was the primary objective. The transition from NRM, which was expected to expire after the 4 years in 1990, was extended another 5 years without the voter participating in the extension of the mandate. This political action was the real beginning of the political corruption and its institutionalization within NRM itself. First, the election of 1989 was limited to the expansion of the NRC instead of rejuvenating the mandate of the entire regime. Applying the 4 criteria of democratization above to the situation in Uganda, CASFA concluded that, quote, the 1989 elections fared rather poorly to the extent that open voting inhibited expression of choice. They could not vote freely. The elections did not put NRM government at risk, unquote. From 1989, the democratization process was going downhill on a slippery political slope. The same electoral rules used in 1989 applied during the election of the CA representatives in 1994 and the presidential and parliamentary elections of 96 and 2001, leading to similar flawed electoral results. In fact, it must be pointed out that NRM structure is mainly attributable to Museveni's personality as a micromanager. There is no explicit political philosophy that dictated the structure of the NRM system in Uganda. The fusion of society and the state, especially at the lowest level, explains the dominancy of the NRM after it became a political party in the electoral process. Reports of the observers of the electoral process in February 18, 2011 elections did not only notice but also understood the problem created by the nature and structure of NRM regime. The presidential and parliamentary elections of 2011, like those before, were not free and fair because there was no level playing field, and the NRM party campaign was illegally funded by the state. This is clear from for example, the report of the Commonwealth Observer Group, Uganda presidential and parliamentary elections, 18 February 2011. So the fusion of the state and NRM continued to have a direct impact on the electoral process even after the restoration of multi-party system. In order to complete the fusion of the state with the society, NRM enacted the Movement Act 1997. Under the Movement Act, every citizen of Uganda was declared a member of the movement or the NRM political structure. That is an integral part of the state of Uganda. The Movement Act was, in essence, a declaratory law only because under the RC system and LOC system previously, each adult resident in a village was automatically a member of the village council. Nevertheless, the Movement Act clearly violated Article 20, Sub-Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees the right of an individual to voluntarily choose to belong to an association. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by the way, is what we call now customary law. It has become a universal customary law because all states, do uphold its principles. No individual should be required under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to belong to a voluntary political organization in a democratic system by virtue of a legislative mandate. The enactment of the Movement Act was clear evidence that Museveni did not philosophically believe in political freedom. Museveni's politics is not guided by political principles compatible with democracy. Individuals were not given a choice whether they wanted to associate with the movement system or not. The restoration of multi-parties in 2005 did very little to change the mentality of the people who saw NRM, its leaders, and the state as one and the same. Museveni had efficiently done his dirty work. The fusion of NRM and the state corrupted the entire political system, thereby seriously crippling the democratization process. Now, briefly, we look at the factual gaps and inconsistencies in sowing the mustard seed. We conclude with a closer look at the factual gaps, the contradictions and inconsistencies we have observed in Museveni's story and NRM philosophy, in the hope that they can rationally be explained. We believe that there are three elements of factual gaps, inconsistencies and contradictions in the story directly relate to the personality of the author and make it difficult for an informed reader to swallow Museveni's story wholesale without reservations. The factual gaps in the story are important because they tell us a lot about the character of the author. Let us look at the factual gaps first. The relationship of Museveni with DP. One of the factual gaps relates to Museveni's alleged relationship with the DP, which we touched on earlier. This relationship may appear to be irrelevant or remotely related to historical explanation of Museveni's political behavior, but in fact it is. Museveni gives two inconsistent accounts regarding his relationship with the DP. First, Museveni wrote that he was a sympathizer of DP because his parents were members of DP by virtue of sectarianism. That line of reasoning may sound convincing to some, but it is, in fact, it is not true. It contains an element of sectarianism which makes the relationship appear abnormal. Just before UPM was formed, Museveni wrote that he rejected the idea of rejoining DP. The idea of rejoining DP means that Museveni must have been a full member of DP, and therefore he was more than a sympathizer of DP. The word he used was rejoin. You rejoin what you belonged to before. In fact, being a young youth winger of DP, as Museveni claims, should mean that Museveni was actually a full member of DP. We must therefore determine which of the three possibilities are true. Was Museveni a sympathizer, a member of DP, or not at all? That is, not a member at all. The truth is that the statements about Museveni's relationship with the DP are meant to mislead about his political past. Museveni is giving the impression that a decade between 1990 and 1960 and 1970, he was a member of DP. But his claim lacks credibility. he wants to avoid or even hide any close or intimate relationship with UPC in the past. In 1964, clearly states that his group was sympathetic to Kakonge, socialist wing within the UPC. In fact, all his friends in his group from Ontari belonged to UPC. These included Elia Kategaya, Ruhakana Rugunda was not from Ontari, was from Mwiri, and Perez Kamunanwiri, that one was from Budo. Kamunanwiri has always been proud of having been a UPC youth winger, and he has told us many stories about the people he associated with. Why would Museveni belong to DP while all his closest friends belonged to UPC, especially given the fact that all the members of the group had a very similar way of thinking and about politics and ideology at the time? Certainly, ideologically, DP was very different from UPC in the 1960s. Moreover, if Museveni had been recruited to work for General Service Unit, which was established in 1964, probabilities are that Museveni was a member of UPC, in which case his alleged relationship with DP, if it existed, was either fraudulent or strategically used to spy on DP politicians. This fact may be one reason Museveni wants to disassociate himself from UPC. Therefore, Museveni's claim that he was either a sympathizer or a member of DP has no credibility. It is meant to cover up his political past. Incredibly, Museveni does not mention anything among his friends who, like him, were youth wingers with him in DP. Let him name at least one. He does not in his book. He does not say that I was a youth winger in DP with Mubilu. Let him do so. Museveni could not have been the only youth who belonged to DP. The gap is therefore a deliberate omission. Between 1966 and 1967, Obote started his political crusade known as the move to the left. It was in 1966 when Museveni ceased to be a Mulokole because he became a socialist believer, and for that very reason made a collective decision with his group to apply to Dar es Salaam University, where his main attraction, by his own admission, was the socialist or progressive leader Julius K. Nyerere. But Museveni claims that he continued to be a member of DP until 1970. Unbelievable. That sounds incredible. When Obote published the Common Man's Charter, which was equivalent to Nyerere's Arusha Declaration, Museveni and many other socialists in Uganda campaigned for it. These facts point to the conclusion that in his story, Museveni is not honest. We must read Sowing the Mustard Seed with caution and suspicion. There is evidence that Museveni and all members of his group belong to UPC and not DP. There is sufficient circumstantial evidence to prove that Museveni was a member of UPC. That's why he got a job in the president's office. They couldn't give a DP man a job in the president's office at that time. It's incredible, unbelievable. Now, GSU, General Service Unit membership. Another factual gap in the story in Museveni's espionage activities in the General Service Unit. Obviously, we did not expect Museveni to confess about his spying activities for General Service Unit. The fact is that Museveni was an officer in the General Service Unit. Museveni's personality fits very well into that of a spy profile. Museveni's blind ambition for power, his vindictiveness, and his lack of trust of others all spell well for a spy's personality. We should remember that Museveni tremendously enjoys impressing others, another common trait of a good spy. We believe that the reason Museveni had a close relationship with notorious dictators, Nyerere, Gaddafi, Castro, was the fact that he wanted to impress them as one of them, not fully comprehending at the time the adverse consequences, his facts in the future. In fact, isn't it very incredulous that Museveni can be close, he can admire Nyerere, he can admire Gaddafi, he can admire and accept in his writing, admire Fidel Castro, but he does not admire Nelson Mandela. I haven't seen it anywhere. Why? That is a big gap. It says a lot about Museveni. For example, Museveni was very close to Julius Nyerere, given his very youthful age as compared to Nyerere. Such a relationship could only thrive if Museveni convinced Nyerere through psychological tricks, of which Museveni, by the way, is very good, that he was an authentic socialist, a true comrade. But as we have seen, Museveni turned capitalist after 1988. But he never denounced the oppressive socialist regime headed by Nyerere in the past. In fact, he could not, as a matter of fact, do that because he had already impressed Nyerere that he was a staunch socialist. Now you know where his ideological ambiguity comes from his personality. The fact that Nyerere wrote a foreword to Museveni's book published in 2000, this is the book called What is Africa's Problem? That's the title of the book. What is Africa's Problem? And Nyerere wrote a foreword to that book in 2000. You know, that forced Museveni to live a double life. With Nyerere, Museveni continued to be an authentic socialist. With the World Bank and the IMF, Museveni was a stalwart, progressive, young capitalist. That double image conformed very well with the personality of a spy whose existence thrives well in the shadows of the dark political corridors where masks are the face of the trade mysterious deaths. There are also factual gaps when you read the book of mysterious, a mysterious kind, some of which emanate from wars Museveni fought. Guweddeko we mentioned earlier, as we have shown in earlier conversations. Guweddeko was a close confidant of Lule. He was second command in NRA in 1983. He died in mysterious circumstances described as friendly fire. His family has refused to accept a bribe of a posthumous Kagera award given to NRM heroes. This guy was a hero, Guweddeko, and Museveni does not mention him, and he was the second in command, and Museveni does not mention his name in sowing the mustard seed. Museveni cannot even reveal exactly where Guweddeko's body was buried, so that his family can retrieve the body and give it a decent cultural burial. Why? Chances are Guweddeko was shot in the head from behind. That is, he was technically executed. But why? That is the factual gap Museveni will not fill without incriminating himself in committing war crimes in Ruel Triangle. There are many other factual gaps in Museveni's story, which the reader must find. Kaira's death remains a mystery. Museveni is blatantly corrupt, in a blatantly corrupt manner, went as far as buying a house for Betty Kaira, the widow of Kaira, in Poughkeepsie, New York. For purposes of full disclosure, here, Kaira was my friend. We attended the Mosh conference together in 1979 and became members of the Consultative Council. After he escaped from Uganda via Germany, he and his family of 7 members lived with my family in my house in Brockton, Massachusetts, until they were able to relocate. So, I disclose that so that you know why I'm saying that. I may be biased. The taxpayers' money was used, and probably there is no official record for it. The money that bought Betty Kaira's house in Poughkeepsie. The embassy in Washington, headed by Ambassador Elizabeth Bagaya, at the time was involved in purchasing the house for Betty Kaira. If Museveni was so concerned about the welfare of Kaira's widow and his children, why has he not released the official report detailing the findings of the Scotland Yard and NRM Uganda police investigators? Another mysterious death is that of Raiti Omongin. At a meeting in Nairobi in 1975, attended by Museveni and Yoga Dola, the issue of the death of Raiti Omongin came up. Museveni tried to deny involvement in Omongin's death, but the issue was left open-ended and has never been resolved. It remains a big factual gap in Museveni's narrative. We mention a few of these mysterious factual gaps for purposes of illustration and explanation. Museveni's story cannot be complete as long as the factual gaps continue to gape at us. many questions remain unanswered. Museveni is the only person with the accurate information to fill these factual gaps by telling the truth. But even more important, there is a good reason why those who know Museveni well fear him tremendously, in the same way Amin and Obote were feared by their opponents, including Museveni. Personality in politics is always destiny because it is inevitably intertwined in the character and behavior of the individual actor. Philosophical inconsistencies. Museveni's story is also full of philosophical inconsistencies. In 1988, he enacted sectarian law by amending the penal code in order to punish those who allegedly promoted sectarianism. The real purpose of the sectarian law was to silence Museveni's political opponents and critics in the press. Therefore, this is a philosophical inconsistency because Museveni, the one who has always condemned colonialism, used a colonial law to suppress his opponents, political opponents. I'm not going to go very far on that one. I think you are familiar. I've gone over that very much, and I don't have much time left. And there are also theoretical inconsistencies, which are very, very, very important in Museveni's story. But let me conclude with Museveni's ideology. These findings we have made bring us closer to lead directly to the mystery of Museveni's ideology. Museveni is a political youth. As a political youth in Dar es Salaam University, he was a radical socialist communist. It is clear that the theory of social metamorphosis was based more on Museveni's belief in communist ideology than on anything else. The theory is concrete evidence that once upon a time Museveni was a communist. Otherwise, he would not have believed in that theory. Museveni's theory, if he still believes in it, its validity gives us a clear link between Museveni and the socialist communist ideology. He can try to hide, but he cannot. He can run, but he cannot hide. Then we have the comparison between Museveni, Gaddafi, and Castro. This is a sharp there is a sharp contrast to be. Museveni is a sharp contrast to the bearded, shrewd Fidel Castro, who is a straightforward and proud cigar-smoking communist. Unlike Museveni, who is clean-shaven and bald-headed, Castro has been religiously open about his communist ideology and has always openly declared what he believes in. Not even poverty and corruption have driven Castro into secret collaboration with capitalism. Museveni is the opposite. Castro is likely to leave behind a proud, though checkered legacy. Museveni cannot. Probably the personality Museveni resembles most is that of Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi preached socialism while he enjoyed the sweet fruits of capitalism, which he exploited corruptly and extravagantly to achieve his personal, political, and economic goals. Gaddafi was also a very brutal man whose brutality was clearly written on his deadly, devilishly wrinkled face. Like Gaddafi, Museveni is presiding over a reign of terror in Uganda. Recently, a mutilated body of Colonel Muzola with eyes plucked out was delivered to his family in Ankole by NRM security services to his bereaved family in order to strike terror in the hearts of his opponents. Museveni and NRM regime, devoid of shame, is charging the opposition leaders with heinous crimes of treason, concealment of treason, and murder of Muzora. The devil, however, know the truth, but they are oblivious to the laws of history and science, which unequivocally stipulate that facts are indestructible, and therefore truth exists throughout eternity. I may not know who killed Kaira or Guedeko or Muzora, but the truth of what happened cannot be destroyed. Gaddafi is known to have committed similar atrocities against his enemies and political opponents. Indeed, Gaddafi authorized the blowing up of a Panam plane full of innocent victims, all of whom perished in Scotland. Gaddafi declared himself ruler for life and advised his friend Museveni not to waste time running for elections, since he was a revolutionary, and revolutionaries never run for elections. Museveni listened very carefully and probably implemented Gaddafi's plan. Museveni seems to be pursuing a similar but increasingly elusive objective. Like Gaddafi, Museveni trusts no one around him. Museveni is a man for whom suspicion is an ever-present reality. That is why both Museveni and Gaddafi have made their sons and other family members their closest aides and advisors. Clear signs of lack of confidence and trust on part of the two dictators. By comparing Museveni with his closest friends, we finally crack the riddle, the mysterious political riddle. I'm concluding now. Personality is inseparable from political behavior. The quality of leadership depends on personality of the leader. Read the sowing of the mustard seed carefully. The truth is not always obvious in that book. The reader must always read between the lines. Many gaps and ambiguities lie hidden in the apparently innocuous narrative, the concocted theories, the unknown ideology, the ambiguous philosophy, and, of course, the verbal and adjectival crevices, such as reactionary and revolutionary. In these ambiguities and factual gaps are buried Museveni's political secrets. Are the factual gaps the result of ideological ambiguity, the absence of a coherent political philosophy based on the principles, or the result of deliberate attempt by a habitual liar to mislead the reader of sowing the mustard seed? You have to read the book yourself in order to answer these questions satisfactorily for yourself. Here, we have provided all the hints you may need to navigate your trip into the mind of a dictator. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week.